The stakes on this Washington game, yeah, they're different than you'd think.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We'll talk about some recruiting nuggets because, well, they're National Signing Day is next week. Next week, the early National Signing Day, because that's how this wild, wacky world of college football works. And I've got thoughts on the playoff and where Oregon could fall in there. But Dan Lanning needs to win this football game. Not because Oregon would like to have the opportunity for a bye and see. No, that's coming up later in today's show. Dan Lanning needs to win this football game because there's no excuse to lose this football game. There really isn't. Oregon is at home. Oregon is off a bye. I know Washington's off a bye as well, but Oregon's playing at home. Oregon's trying to play for a national championship. Washington has made a bowl game, and frankly, that's some level of accomplishment for the Huskies this season because they're replacing everybody from last year, and they've got a new coaching staff, and I don't know what Washington is going to do at quarterback in this game. It could be Will Rogers, the veteran, or it could be Damon Williams, the future, who played more against UCLA than he has all season, but he's played a little bit here and there. I don't know, but everything lines up for Oregon. They've got more talent, they've got more continuity, and Lanning hasn't gotten over that one single solitary hump. The only thing, not necessarily the only thing, but perhaps the biggest non-national ramifications thing that Dan Lanning still has to pull off is beating Washington. And I think he's got to win this game. I think for a lot of Oregon fans, he's got to win this game big. And by the way, I'm not stating the obvious, well, Oregon's got to win this game if they want to be the number one seed. No. I'm speaking about how Oregon fans will view Dan Lanning if somehow, some way, the Ducks are upset in this spot. There is no reason for Oregon to lose this football game. And what would happen if that cataclysmic scenario were to occur is Oregon could go on after losing this week and win a national championship. That is entirely possible. They're locked into the Big Ten championship game. They could still get a first round bye. Heck, Oregon could punt on this game and say, we'll just put all our chips into the basket of being rested and playing against Ohio State. They're not going to do that. That would be incredibly foolish. You're getting a guy like Tez Johnson back, you want to work him into the fold. Yeah, you run the risk of injury, of course, but last time I checked, you also want to strike that balance between playing, not playing, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, you want Tez Johnson out there on the field. You want the starters out there, but you only want the starters to come off the field because the game has already been decided, because Oregon's up by 30, 40, or 50 points. But what Dan Lanning could have happen if there's an upset here is, it'd be an incredibly embarrassing look for Oregon. All the pressure's on the Ducks. There is no real upside nationally or locally for Dan Lanning winning this game. It'll feel a lot like, if it goes the way that it should, it'll feel like the Civil War circa 2023. Oregon State was coming in ranked, but Oregon was a much better team. There were rumors about Jonathan Smith leaving. That, of course, happened, and Oregon won the game 31-7. I think a lot of Oregon fans will be happy with 31-7. But the pressure on Dan Lanning falls amongst those diehard Oregon fans who look at the schedule every single year and say, if there's only one game we were to win this season, it's going to be against that team up in Seattle. It's win the border war. It's Husky hate week. Gotta win this football game. And he hasn't done that yet. And it doesn't matter why he hasn't won the game or what happened in the past. What matters is what happens on Saturday evening at Autzen Stadium. 4:30 p.m. kickoff time at Autzen for probably, but not necessarily, the last time this year in that beautiful palace of college football. But those Oregon fans will start to have the Ryan Day mentality set in. Ryan Day's a really good football coach. There are those subsets of the Ohio State fan base or of the Ohio State media that say, I don't know about Ryan Day. I mean, he lost to Michigan 3 times in a row. By the way, for a long time, it was Jim Harbaugh's never going to be able to beat Ohio State. Oh, what do you know? He was able to figure that out. But if you're Dan Lanning, even though the national ramifications could not be any lower, the internal/local ramifications for the program, for the University of Oregon, could not be much higher. Because everything points towards Oregon, and they're a 19.5 point favorite for a reason. If they play well, they will cover that particular number. But Lanning should win this game, and Lanning needs to win this game by, let's say, at least 14 points for Oregon fans to feel comfortable. Or you'll have to face those questions of, well, are they ever going to beat Washington? Why is it against what? Why isn't this that? You just don't want that hanging over your head. And you know what? We've learned that Dan Lanning's a master motivator. I imagine the last 2 years and those 3 matchups with the Huskies are going to be put into the forefront of the minds of the guys in that locker room, especially those who have been there each of the last couple of seasons. Guys like Jeffrey Bossa and the like. So, that being said, am I confident going into this game? Yes, absolutely. Washington hasn't won a road game this year. They don't know what they're doing at the quarterback position. Their offensive line is not very good. Yeah, plenty of reason to feel confident about Oregon in this spot. I'll talk about the matchup more as the week goes on. Let me know your questions. Twitter, YouTube, become a Locked On Ducks insider, get priority access. That link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. All ways to shoot me questions. But this one came in from Little Ray with a bunch of E's and Y's. As important as the Ohio State game was, I think Dan needs to beat the Huskies just as much, if not more. Coming off a bye and with the bad blood from the last 2 years, is it fair to expect 1, a blowout by halftime, and 2, our highest point total of the season, maybe even reaching the high 50s to low 60s? Appreciate it, even if you can't get to this question. I can always get to your guys' questions. That's what I'm here for. No, it is not reasonable to expect a 50 or 60 piece. It's reasonable to expect a 50 or 60 mentality. Remember against Michigan, when Oregon called timeout at the end of the game, watched the fans leave the stadium? Do you know what happened after that? They scored a touchdown when they didn't need to. They were already up by 14, less than 2 minutes to go. They didn't need to score. But they scored. 38-17 final. That's the sort of mentality I think Oregon fans should expect to see from Dan Lanning in the spot. If the opportunity presents itself to score another touchdown, to add on, to keep your foot on the gas pedal, I imagine he'll take it, while also keeping a watchful eye towards, I want to have my best players available for the Big Ten championship game. Because he didn't want to lose a game all season, obviously. I'm talking about that more later, because I have a lot of thoughts on the Big Ten championship game. But for Oregon in this spot, this game allows Duck fans to take a collective sigh of relief. Like, okay, finally got the Washington thing out of the way, and I suspect that'll happen. But also, it creates a multi-week stretch in which Oregon doesn't have, from a fan standpoint, you don't have to be that stressed out. I'll tell you why later in today's show. We're going to talk about recruiting next, though. But let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter. The 2025 recruiting class will not be completely finalized next Wednesday, December 4th. That's the early signing day. There will be some rather big names that decide. Ones you should be aware of. And we're going to talk about them coming up next. Right after we talk about Game Time, of course. Game Time has this feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks is filtering out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My cousin once told me when you're at a buffet line, don't go for the salad and the little cheese and crackers or what. Don't go for the fluff. Go for the meat. Go get a double order or prime rib. And he's absolutely right. And Game Time uses that same mentality. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. They curate the best deals to you, and you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So Game Time's got everything you're looking for. So what are you waiting for? Do you want to go to the Oregon-Washington game this week? Check out Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's not time for the Oregon game yet, but it is game time. So Dallas Wilson, 5-star wide receiver who I talked about last week on the show, and Yeah, you should keep your eye on that particular name. Florida's making a push. He's committed to Oregon right now. That's a verbal commitment. But he tweeted out yesterday that he is going to sign on December 4th, the early National Signing Day. That's when pen will be put to paper, and barring a Peyton Bowen situation, he'll become an Oregon Duck or not. Or not. That can go either way. Oregon's still got a very real chance. I'm just telling you, I have it on good authority. Florida is making a very serious push to try and he's a Florida kid, so it makes a lot of sense. And he's a really talented guy. Really talented guy. So that's first name to be aware of. But here's another one that's quite fascinating. Na'eem Offord. So Offord is a 5-star defensive back. These are all 5-star prospects, by the way, class of 2025. Offord is a 5-star defensive back who is currently verbally committed to Ohio State. And in this scenario, Oregon is trying to be what Florida is trying to be to Oregon with Dallas Wilson. They're trying to get the old Uno reverse card and flip them around to become a Duck. Now, this has been rumored for a long time. If you go back to the summer shows that I was doing, Offord's name has come up many times before because he's a big-time prospect. He's currently committed to Ohio State and has been for a while. There was even a piece written on an Ohio State website. I think it was Buckeyes 24/7. I don't remember specifically, but it was an Ohio State website saying that the expectation was that, not the possibility, the expectation was that Offord was going to flip. Well, he never did, or at least he hasn't yet. So December 4th could be a crazy day. I keep seeing these tweets from On3 people or Rivals or recruiting services and people that cover it, on the ground that keep saying, oh man, December 4th is going to be crazy. There are going to be so many flips. Well, based on what I have seen, heard, and read about the players Oregon's going after, yeah, that could be true. There could be a lot of madness. There could be a lot of craziness come December 4th. And they've moved it up with the college football playoff schedule and whatnot. This should all be done in February. That's my opinion. I think this should all be done in February. I think it makes it easier for coaches. I think it makes it easier for players. They can finish out their high school seasons and not have this looming. Teams don't have to worry about putting together recruiting classes at the same time they're preparing for conference championship games and the playoff and all that sort of stuff. But this is the world that we've got right now. So Na'eem Offord is down to Ohio State, where he's verbally committed, Auburn, and Oregon. And remember, he has been committed to Ohio State since before the aforementioned, or not aforementioned on this show, but the October 12th game between the Ducks and the Buckeyes. I don't know how big of a difference that makes, but it can't hurt. It cannot hurt. Speaking of 5-star defensive backs, Brandon Finney was on campus this past weekend. So was Jakheem Stewart, who is a 5-star defensive lineman. So Finney has been upgraded by recruiting services, at least by 24/7, to get, I think, by Rivals as well, to get 5-star status. And he has been, not surprisingly, highly coveted by a couple other schools. He had an official visit to Michigan. That apparently did not happen. The school that I've long heard is going after Finney really hard, though, is Penn State. So Penn State's the school to watch for Brandon Finney, who, again, is verbally committed to Oregon. Jakheem Stewart, on the other hand, is not verbally committed anywhere. And so Stewart is a guy that Oregon is just trying to claim. And Stewart was also reportedly on campus over the weekend. He has a long offer list, shall we say. If you think about a big time brand, a big time school, he's got an offer, he's got interest. Like he's got, I'll pull up his interest list right now. The final four, according to 24/7, are Ohio State, LSU, USC, and Oregon. Plenty more could go after him. But this guy is a top 15, 20 player in the class of 2025. He was actually 2026 at one point in time, reclassified to 2025, still a top 5 defensive lineman in the country and a 5-star. That's crazy. It's one thing for a guy like Kyler Casper to do that at wide receiver and still be a highly rated recruit coming out of high school. A defensive lineman to still be he's just going up a class and still top 5 sort of guy. So couple of big time guys that were on campus over the weekend who Oregon is absolutely positively in the thick four. Stewart has had some good things to say about the Ducks, but I think that between all of these guys, Na'eem Offord, Brandon Finney, and Jakheem Stewart, and Dallas Wilson, I think the floor for Oregon, the floor is 2. If one guy flips, I'd expect Oregon to get one of the other ones. If they only come away with one of these 4 guys, I'd be a little disappointed because I think that's falling short of the full potential. I don't see them getting all 4, so I think the ceiling is 3, but I think the floor is absolutely, it should be 2. It should be 2 when you have 2 guys who are already verbally committed. If you lose one to a flip, you should be able to flip somebody else. But if they come up with 3, if they come up with 4, I'm going to go bonkers. I'm going to go crazy because I'm not expecting that. But I think 4 is more likely than 1, but you're probably going to end up with 2 or 3, and we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. And there are other names that can certainly pop up going into December 4th, but those are the big names right now that I'm certainly following on the recruiting trail. And then there's another one. There's another one, and I don't fully understand, but I kind of understand. I don't know. There could be a lot of implications with this. But another newly minted 5-star guy, at least in the eyes of at least one recruiting service, is Jaren Kiwe Sagapolutele. He is a left-handed 5-star quarterback. Oregon is currently having a good amount of success with left-handed quarterbacks. Make of that what you will. When I think left-handed college quarterbacks, I think Sean Canfield of Oregon State. I am not even kidding. That's where my mind goes every single time. I'd be curious where you guys go, but for me, in my life as a college football fan, that's the first left-handed quarterback I really remember seeing in the college game. Of course, Michael Vick in the NFL, but I go to Sean Canfield every time. Oregon is so loaded at the quarterback spot. He's currently verbally committed to Cal. I saw a post that said he's down to Cal and Oregon. Well, on paper, if you look at those 2 schools, yeah, Oregon is the clear and obvious choice, right? Here's the calculation I imagine Jaren is going through. When would he be able to compete for the starting quarterback job? It's not in 2025. And heck, with the redshirting of Dante Moore, it would only be in 2026 if Dante Moore kind of flops as the starter next season. So, and you would still have in the room Achilles Smith Jr., who Oregon already has. That's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the class of 2025. Whereas if Kiwe Sagapolo, I actually had that right and I cut myself off for no reason. If Kiwe Sagapolutele were to commit to Cal, the odds that he plays as a true freshman, they're significantly higher. Significantly higher. And that doesn't factor into every quarterback's calculations. Some guys want to be developed. I mean, look at Dante Moore. He went to UCLA, competed for the starting job right away. It didn't go well. And he goes to Oregon because he knows, I need to be developed. I need time. I need to sit. I need to learn. Maybe Jaren feels like he wants to play right away. That's what I imagine the calculation has to be. Do I want to have a chance to go to Oregon and compete for the starting job in a crowded room of really talented guys? Novosad is in the room. Luke Moga is in the room, who's a crazy good athlete. Like, there are just a lot. There are a lot of guys to go up against there. I imagine Cal's lineup of quarterbacks isn't as deep. But Oregon's apparently still in the fold. I don't think there's really anybody else, at least that I have seen. And I don't know. I don't know. That one's a little bit bizarre to me. I don't know. We'll see. We'll just have to wait and see and react to it as the news comes down. But that's an outside one that I think Oregon fans should definitely keep an eye on. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. There's going to be more off-season content to discuss once the regular season, the Big Ten Championship, come to a close. But alas, let's see if we can keep the questions to in-season stuff for now. I promise there'll be plenty of time in the off-season and whatnot. But I want to talk about seeding coming up next. And go back to the Washington game for a moment. Because if Oregon beats Washington, Oregon fans can relax for a couple weeks, even with the conference championship on the line. That's coming up next. Coming up right now is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And yes, of course, they've got college football as well. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need. Everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Do you think Oregon is going to beat Washington into oblivion? 38-6 or something? Oregon minus 19.5 is at FanDuel.com. Do you think that Oregon's going to, they'll win, it'll be fine, but it won't be as great as you want it to? Well, Washington plus 19.5 is also available. 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, mailbag question to wrap up today's show. You know how to get in the mailbag. YouTube comments, Twitter, DMs are wide open. Become a Locked On Ducks insider. Get priority access. Link below. Free 14-day trial. This question came from Instagram. And you know what? I forgot to jot down the name of the guy who sent it to me. And I want to give him credit because I don't often get a question and find myself laughing within the first 2 seconds of reading it. But the question came from Jared. Jared says, am I just really smart or are most college football fans really dumb? That's great. That's 10 out of 10 way to start a question, man. I interact with a lot of different college football fans. If you don't know, I host Locked On College Football, which you should make your second listen of the day or second view if you're watching on YouTube, because I talk about the entire wonderful sport of college football. And I see a lot of different fan bases. And look, there are plenty of fans out there that don't understand football that well. And that's okay. That's okay. Passion is mandatory, first and foremost, to be a fan. Knowledge, not required, but definitely desired. Jared asks, how difficult is it to understand the difference between a ranking and a playoff seeding? Well, with that particular question, I understand why people get confused. College Game Day did an entire segment a couple weeks ago where they spent 5 mind-numbing minutes trying to explain this difference because clearly not everyone gets it. And you know what? I understand why. This is brand new. We've never seen this before. So I'd give fans some leeway in this particular matter. But the way that a team can be ranked number 8, let's say, but be seeded number 9 or 10 is through something that I am vehemently opposed to, and that's auto bids. Auto bids suck. Full stop. Don't like them. I never wanted them to be there. The irony, no, what's the word the lack of consistency. It's not the word I'm looking for, but that's the thought I'm going for. The lack of consistency applied in major changes to college football goes something like this. One of many areas that don't make a lot of sense, but it goes like this. Conferences should not have divisions, because if you have divisions, then teams benefit from being in a weaker division, and teams are punished for being in a stronger division. And so we should just put the best 2 teams in the conference championship game. And everyone looked around and said, oh, hey, they're right. Yeah, this is ridiculous. Michigan and Ohio State are beating the crap out of whoever comes out of the Big Ten West every year because it's somebody like Iowa or Purdue or Northwestern or Wisconsin or some random team. And those aren't the 2 best teams. So yeah, let's get rid of that. And then we go to the 12-team playoff. And then in the 12-team playoff, they decide, all right, let's give 4 byes to the highest ranked conference champions, but you have to be a conference champion. Like, wait, whoa, hold on. Wait a second. Back up. Roll it back a bit. You're telling me that if we'd had the 12-team playoff in 2023, you would not have given a first round bye to Georgia? Now, they were what were they? 12-1? Yeah, they were 12-1 at that point in time. But let's say hypothetically that scenario played out without the conference champions that you had last year, where Michigan was undefeated in the Big Ten and Texas was one loss with a win over Alabama and champion of the Big 12, and Washington was champion of the Pac-12 and whatnot. Like, let's just say hypothetically, you had a 12-0 team lose in the SEC championship game, or any other conference for that matter. How in the world are you going to look at the champion of the Big 12, which is a wildly fun and amazing league, but doesn't have a team that can sniff a national championship this season? How are you going to look at a team that is 12-1 in the SEC or the Big Ten, like Oregon this year, for instance, and say you are less deserving of a bye than a team that lost 3 games this year? You know who could win the Big 12 this year? Let me give you a lineup of teams that could win the Big 12 this year. West Virginia, Baylor, Texas Tech, Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, the list goes on. There are 9 teams all in all that are in contention here. The point is that it is incredibly illogical. It is incredibly illogical, and I don't like it because you are taking the logic and only applying it to a certain segment of the sport. That teams benefit because of where they happen to be placed. You happen to be in the Big 12 conference, and realignment makes this confusing on the one hand, but the same principle applies. You should not look at a conference champion and say, well, you're a conference champion, so that means you're the same over here. No, absolutely, positively not. Absolutely not. So auto bids are ridiculous. Now, to your question, Jared, the difference between a ranking and a seeding comes back to the auto bid. Because a team might not be ranked based on their resume as high as a team who's ranked above them. For example, Notre Dame could end this season 11-1. But a 3-loss Colorado team could get a first-round bye. Why? Because they have a conference championship game. Sure, they lost more games with a schedule comparable to that of Notre Dame, but they won a conference championship game. So, we should just give them a bye. But those are the rules. That's the way it's written. So that is how someone can be a lower seed than they are ranked. Ranking is reflection of how you have performed this year. Seeding is reflection of how you've performed combined with these stupid rules that we came up with. So I don't know how hard that is for people to comprehend. I hope I've explained it decently well and why I oppose auto bids at all costs. I do not support in any way, shape, or form, well, if you automatically no. I'm not against playing conference championship games, by the way. The opportunity to bolster your resume should absolutely be there. But please stop pretending like a conference championship over here automatically makes you better than a team that didn't win a conference championship over there. Because, as the Big 12 is going to show you this year, it flat out doesn't. Because, think about this. Georgia is going to the SEC championship game. They could lose to, let's say, let's say they lose to Texas. Which team in the Big 12 is better than Georgia? Yeah. So last thing, and I mentioned this earlier and got a little sidetracked, almost forgot to put it in, which would have driven some of you crazy. But guess what? I care very much about the experience you have, and I don't want to leave you hanging like that. The reason this Washington game can kind of take the pressure off of Oregon fans for a little while is when you look at the seeding and the way it is set up for the 12-team playoff, if Oregon beats Washington, they lock themselves into, in all likelihood, either the 1 seed if they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, or the 5 seed, which has a great path to the college football playoff semifinal. Now, there are advantages and there are disadvantages we can talk about with regards to having a bye and being rested versus playing each week. Like that's a conversation we can have. And if you want me to dive into that more on tomorrow's show or a later episode, by all means, happy to do it. But the 5 seed in the 12-team playoff gets to play the 12 seed in the first round, which in the eyes of the committee will be the least deserving team to get into the playoff, or the worst team, so to speak. And then in the next round, the quarterfinal, they don't go and play the 1 seed, they play the 4 seed. So they'll play the worst conference champion that got a bye. This is the system that people set up. This is the one they like. This is what they want. I'm not saying it's how I would do it. In many ways, it definitely isn't. But if Oregon beats Washington this week, I think there is a high likelihood that, obviously, if they beat Ohio State, they're the 1 seed, no questions asked. But if they lose, really good chance they would be the 5 seed. And they'd have a great path to get to the semifinals. And if you're going to win the national championship, you got to beat great teams at some point in time. But boy, I tell you, you get closer if you have that path. And the 2 teams you'd likely play in those spots, in whichever order, would be the Group 5 champion, Boise State in all likelihood, and the Big 12 champion, the weakest of the Power 4 conference champs. Though I don't know that the ACC champ is necessarily great. That's, again, different conversation. But I will leave you with that for today. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.